On Monday, May 17th, President Barack Obama met with Rahm Emanuel and was informed by his chief of staff that a number of Democratic U.S. senators were still insisting on the inclusion of the Glass-Steagall Amendment and the restrictions on derivatives in the Dodd Financial Reform Bill. Emanuel had already been engaged in round-the-clock negotiations over the weekend, attempting to cajole, bribe, and threaten senators into dropping their amendments, and letting the Dodd bill go to a final vote unchanged and without any real attempt to make any effective regulation or reform of Wall Street's total control of the U.S. economy. In characteristic Nero fashion, the president went absolutely berserk and demanded that all such Senate insubordination be crushed immediately. He demanded that the Dodd bill be passed as is by Thursday. Over the course of the next 72 hours, on Obama's orders, Emanuel, Larry Summers, Majority Leader Harry Reid, and Senator Chris Dodd used every dirty trick in the book to kill the Cantwell-McCain Amendment to restore the Glass-Steagall banking standard, and to also kill the Lincoln-Cantwell Amendment, which sought to reverse Dodd's sabotage rewrite of the anti-derivatives measure that was already in the bill. While there are plenty of other factors at play, including a swarm of Wall Street lobbyists descending upon Capitol Hill in a desperate drive to kill every effort to strengthen the final bill, none of those factors mitigate against President Barack Obama's own personal role in virtually committing the United States to its own destruction by sabotaging the implementation of a new Glass-Steagall Act and halting the banning of derivatives. Those two aforementioned amendments were the only prospective good to be welcomed in the otherwise impotent Dodd bill. Instead, Wall Street speculators will continue to enjoy the same unhindered protection to destroy the U.S. physical economy and drive us closer and closer to hyperinflation. Obama's deeds well surpass the high crimes and misdemeanor standard for impeachment. President Barack Obama's crimes dwarf even those of Richard Nixon. Public evidence alone demonstrates that he is leading a conspiracy to subvert constitutional government and to impose measures which would result in mass death of Americans and the destruction of the nation as a whole. His crimes, high crimes and misdemeanors, as we will elaborate here, include actions which amount to a conspiracy to commit crimes against humanity, which will predictably result in murder and other atrocities, the promotion of terrorism by ensuring the protection of international terror's largest source of funding, and worst of all, engaging in the active destruction of the future of the United States by cutting funding to its single most important program, the space program. In light of these facts, President Obama's remaining in the presidency represents a clear and present danger to the United States, its citizens, and its Constitution. Constitutional means must be used to prevent him from carrying out these crimes. Therefore, based on his actions to block Glass-Steagall, which is the only measure that's available to us right now to save the United States, we are now reissuing our call for the immediate impeachment of Barack Obama. Now, the second reason Obama has to go centers on his role for pushing the so-called health reform legislation. President Obama conspired and acted to carry out, through his promotion of his Hitler-modeled healthcare legislation, crimes against humanity by denial of medical care and therefore outright murder of large segments of the United States population. That fact, the fact that the health reform legislation that was pushed by the president will lead to the denial of medical care is incontestable by anyone who's honest and knowledgeable about this bill. The chief stated purpose of the bill was to cut costs. The fundamental premise of the bill is that Americans, the American public, has been overutilizing medical services which allegedly do not contribute to improving their health. And this overutilization should be eliminated in order to save money. In addition to denying care to certain categories of the population, the new reform also contains numerous measures which reduce the availability of medical and surgical facilities. Americans are now subject to denial of medical and surgical care and death by starvation and malnutrition, all in the name of saving money. Tens of thousands will be slated for death. For this action to commit this crime against humanity, President Obama should be impeached. Third, President Barack Obama's treasonous actions in Afghanistan, where he's sending American troops to be shot and killed for the benefit of a foreign enemy. A series of terrorist bombings aimed against the government of Russia and the Russian nation began in late March of this year with a suicide bombing on the Moscow subway system, killing 38 people and injuring over 100 more. Lyndon LaRouche, including other military officials, have identified that these terrorist attacks and terrorist activity in general in this part of the world base their logistical support on the profits made through the Afghan opium drug trafficking. Head of the Russian Drug Enforcement Agency, Ivanov, and United States retired General Barry McCaffrey unanimously consented that indeed the greatest threat from the production and trading of opium in Afghanistan is not only the killing of more people than military operations, but that the drug trade had a direct link to financing of the late March, early April terrorist bombings. Furthermore, the evidence is it's there and is very well documented on LaRouchePAC.com that with the British, under the British Prime Minister Tony Blair taking over Helmand Province, opium production in Afghanistan soared, fueling the logistical base for international terrorism. What was and still is Obama's policy in that situation? Absolutely nothing. Obama's policy is to protect the opium plants by refusing to cooperate with the nation of Russia to eradicate the lifeline of terrorist activity. Barack Obama's 24-hour trip to Kabul in the wake of the terrorist bombings in Russia consolidated his personal stance of complicity by spending his 24-hour visit scolding Afghan President Karzai for corruption, while he himself refused to make a single mention on the opium trade. Because of this decision by President Barack Obama, American soldiers are being shot and killed by an enemy that Obama is defending. Obama has adopted a policy where he's sending U.S. troops to be killed by insurgents that are backed by the British policy of protecting opium production. That decision, tantamount to treason, must be faced with impeachment of Barack Obama. Finally, the biggest crime by far is President Barack Obama's stated intention to shut down and destroy the NASA program at its root. When you add this to what was already stated here, the line must be drawn now. Back in February, OMB Director Peter Orszag revealed a 2011 budget that was devoid of any real economic investment, proposing that Congress invest essentially nothing in hard infrastructure: transportation, nuclear power, rail corridors, water transport, or clean water, but the shutting down of NASA's manned space exploration, after 50 years of this nation's most important program, was the worst of its terrible concoction. Since the founding of our republic, the existence of our nation is dependent upon surges in science-driven and related increases of the productive powers of labor, per capita and per square kilometer of our territory. Now, the very means of science and technology by which the existence of our republic had formerly prospered have been destroyed, step by step by step. Our industries have gone, the security of our food supplies have been undermined, and now the last bastion of technological progress, the space program, is scheduled for obliteration. The cancellation of the manned space flight means the destruction of the future. So not only has Barack Obama committed crimes against the current U.S. population with his rejection of Glass-Steagall, his health reform, and his protection of Afghan opium, but now seeks to commit the ultimate crime by murdering many members of our yet-to-be-born future generations with the shutdown of our space program. Simply put, the time has come that President Obama must go, either by his own choice or by ours. The intention of our federal Constitution demands this. The need for Obama's ouster, either by resignation or impeachment, is now an existential issue for both our republic and the welfare of the planet generally. Obama must go now.